Hey folks, welcome to another edition of My Car Guru. Just reading the news here this morning in the automotive world, NADA headlines. White House is proposing relaxed fuel economy standards in a bid to lower prices today. So gas prices have gone down dramatically. They're expected to go down even more, which is great news for people who are struggling with grocery store prices and everything else. But now this is a bid to actually reduce the prices of vehicles. That'd be good. Anything to get the cost down. Again, one of my big pet peeves is just the amount of technology that is being jammed into every new vehicle. I just don't see it as necessary. Would you be willing to go back to crank windows? Probably not. So could you do without all the whiz-bang technology? Could you do without like Apple CarPlay? I love Apple CarPlay. It's wonderful. I listen to podcasts most of the time. I don't listen to the radio anymore. I used to. I don't even listen to satellite radio anymore. Because I like to be able to choose, and I don't like commercials, even though I run a lot of commercials. That's kind of one of the things I have to do. So if they relax the fuel economy standards, then the manufacturers can reduce costs. They can make vehicles less expensive because they keep having to use technology to make the engines more fuel efficient. Things like variable valve timing and direct fuel injection and all these different technologies that have been designed to basically get more horsepower out of smaller displacement engines. I mean, one of our best-selling, I take that back. 3 of our best-selling vehicles at my Ford and Nissan dealership have 3-cylinder engines. I remember we were a Chevrolet dealer, and Chevrolet came out with this little car called, let's see, who made that thing? I think it was made by Daewoo, but it was called a Geo Metro. Do you remember Geo? That was an attempt by Chevrolet or General Motors under the Chevrolet sign, basically, to come up with an import brand. And so they had, I think they had 3 different vehicles. One made by Daewoo, another made by Isuzu. That was called the Geo Storm. And then they had a third vehicle called the Geo Prism, and it was basically a Toyota Corolla. It was built at a plant out in California, and it was a joint venture between Toyota and General Motors called the New United Motor Manufacturing Incorporated. NUMI is what they called it. And while Toyota continued to just sell the heck out of Corollas, the Geo Prism was not a fast mover. When it first came out, get this, do you remember the Nova? It used to be called the Chevy 2. And then I think somewhere in the early 70s, they changed it to the Chevy Nova. They couldn't sell it as the Nova in Mexico because in Spanish, Nova or Noba means no-go. So that was a no-go in Mexico. But in the United States, they call it the Chevy Nova. I totaled one time, brand new. And so it went to bed. They canceled that vehicle, but as General Motors typically does, and Ford does too, and Chrysler, they resurrect names from the past, hoping that will carry the day. So when the Chevrolet version of the Toyota Corolla came out, they called it, that's right, the Nova. And so that didn't work. Vehicle didn't sell very well. So then they came out with this Geo idea. Brilliant. So then they had all those cars. They changed the name to the Geo Prism. And people didn't know what it was, and it didn't sell. So they abandoned the whole Geo thing, and they stopped selling all of those vehicles. That's one of the biggest differences I see between the Japanese companies. Hyundai and Kia, they change vehicles and models and designs like I change my britches. But they're Korean automakers, okay? But the Japanese stick with the models. Think about Honda, for example. They never decided to call the Honda Accord something else, or the Honda Civic, or the Honda Pilot. I mean, they stick with the name. They come out with a product. They gradually, over time, improve it. They'll change designs. They've done some radical things. I'm not sure I like the new Hondas and the way many of them look. I love the Accord. I think it's a beautiful car, and I would buy it all day long over a Toyota Camry, but that's just me. But, they stick with the names, and the domestic manufacturers just jump all over the place. But one thing they do love to do is resurrect old names. I remember when the Malibu, it was gone for a long time. And it was a really cool car back in the 70s, and then they ruined it in 1973 and then completely eliminated it not too many years after that. Then it came back. Well, just think of some of them that went away and came back as far as Chevrolet is concerned. Camaro, Impala, let's see what else. Monte Carlo, let's see what else. The Blazer and the Trailblazer. Of course, Ford came back with the Bronco. They never eliminated the Mustang. It's been here since 1964 and a half. But they had a quite the streak of comebacks. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if, when it comes back, it hits the mark, as far as what they're trying to accomplish. I think the Bronco is going to be around for a long time. It's got legs. Part of that's due to the fact that it has two different models. One of them's called a Bronco Sport, which is based on the Ford Escape and the Ford Maverick. They're all on the same chassis. And then the Bronco itself is built on a Ford Ranger chassis. And it's just got one basic competitor, and that's the Jeep Wrangler. And as popular as the Wrangler is, those two are going to be going head-to-head for a long time. I'll tell you another Ford that's been around for a long time, the Ford Explorer. You may not remember this, but the Ford Explorer was the first of the small SUVs to come out. There was no Chevy Blazer or Trailblazer or GMC Jimmy or anything like that. The Ford Explorer was the true Trailblazer. Okay, I'll be back in just 1 minute. Okay, welcome back. I've got the window sticker for my 1970 Ford Bronco in front of me. The base price for a Bronco wagon, that's what they called it, was $3,149.41. The Reef Aqua color of my vehicle was no charge. The 302 two-barrel V8 engine was $215 extra. That was an option. The front and rear chrome bumpers, $30.14. Let's see, the tires, no extra charge. Hardboard headliner. Instead of having a stitched-in headliner like most cars have or had back then, this one was just a vinyl-covered piece of cardboard, basically. It was expensive, too, $15.93. It has a hand throttle because you can actually hook up a PTO to this thing and actually operate farm equipment if you wanted to. But anyway, it had a hand throttle, and that was a whopping $3.71. Wheel covers, $27.60 for a grand total of $3,466.10. So let's see, what is this, 2025? I think I bought that thing in 2013. I paid $17,000 for it. I found it on, what was it? It's either eBay or Craigslist. Don't remember exactly. That thing, well, you probably have seen what Broncos have done. Today, that vehicle's probably worth somewhere between, because it's all original and it only has 36,000 miles, it's worth somewhere between $75,000 and $90,000. I know, it's just nuts. I should sell it, but that's my part of my 401k. So you think about those simplified options, though. This is my point. I was just looking at some of the high-tech features that a lot of cars have today. And I'll just give you a quick rundown. Adaptive cruise control. I remember the cruise control of the 60s and 70s. I mean, I was alive back then. It was pretty crude. There was nothing electronic about it. It was actually done with a combination of just direct connections, mechanical connections, and vacuum. That's it. Now it's adaptive cruise control, self-leveling system, electronic instrument panel control module, electronic stability control system, electronic traction control system, forward and rear parking cameras, GPS navigation system, heated seats, cooled seats. What else here? Oh, automatic emergency braking, blind spot monitoring, lane departure warning, night vision system, active park assist. This is just a sampling of things that are covered under a Ford extended service contract. You know, they list everything under their best plan that is not covered, but just so that you get some kind of a feel for what is, they list these things. So, you know, that's just a lot of stuff. Oh, yeah, one other thing that they cover, the clock. Now, a loaded car, 1973, we were a Chevy dealer. Let's just say a Chevrolet Caprice. If it was really fancy, it had a vinyl top. They don't do those anymore. It had intermittent wipers, did have cruise control, power windows, power door locks. Let's see, cigarette lighter. Yeah, that was an option. And then what was the other one? 8-track stereo system. Could you get leather seats in a 1973 Caprice? No. You could get vinyl seats, but not leather, not in a Chevy Caprice. You could in a Cadillac, probably could in an Oldsmobile or a Buick. But you know, most people didn't order leather back then. No. They wanted these fat, padded, luxurious velour seats. I mean, I remember seeing an Oldsmobile 98. You open it up and I won't say what it looked like, but it looks like a house of ill repute. Let's just say that. Not that I've seen one, but I've seen them in movies. And, you know, all the overstuffed furniture and the pleats and the buttons all over the door panels and all these treatments, you know, all the faux wood on the dash. It was just a crazy time. But as far as expensive features to work on, to fix, there weren't any. That's why we didn't sell any extended warranties. They didn't exist either. Not back in the early 70s or even the late 70s. They didn't come around until the 80s. And it's because, you know, labor rates went up, parts prices went up, finance offices were really into selling just about anything they could to increase revenue for the dealership because the automakers kept cutting the margins. I remember in 1971, 72, there was 21% markup in the typical Chevrolet car. If it was a Corvette, it was 23 to 25%. See, now it's between 5 and 6%. Now, cars have gone up a whole lot. But as far as the margins, they have really gone down. And so what dealers were doing, that's when dock fees, processing fees started. I remember our first processing fee, I believe it was $25. And you talk about almost a customer revolt. I mean, it was crazy. But a lot of dealers were doing it, mostly in the bigger cities. And as is typically the case, it starts in the larger cities. It starts on the West Coast, then moves across the country to the larger cities, and then gets to the rural dealers and the markets. And so they start picking up, hey, maybe we should charge a processing fee. They call it a documentary fee. And I can't tell you how many times I was sitting in a finance office, and I've got this farmer in front of me, and he said, "What's that for?" And I said, well, I would just start justifying it and making up all this. Well, I wasn't necessarily making up stuff. I was saying what I was told to say. It covered all of the paperwork that we had to do. Don't you have to do the paperwork anyway? Well, that was true too. He said, well, we also go and get your tags. I'll go get my tags. You know, it was just, I couldn't win. So I ended up giving the dock fee away. Well, now the average dock fee in Tennessee is just under $1,000. Isn't that crazy? But you know why they do it? It's not just. I mean, it's worse in a lot of big markets. I've heard the highest I've heard is $19.95 out in California for a processing fee. What's that for? It's for profit. That's what it's really for. I mean, there have been many months in my past in the car business that if we didn't have a dock fee, we would have lost money in the dealership. It was that important, especially when times are really tough and really competitive. Because if you got some dealer that all of a sudden starts lowballing prices all over the place, you've got to respond. You've got to cut your prices, and you get to the point where there's just nothing left. And so that's why most dealers charge processing fees. If they tell you it's to cover anything but additional profit, they're fibbing about that. And I've been told by many customers over the years, I'm not paying that. And the problem is, in our state, you have to charge it to everybody. If you're going to charge it to anybody, you got to charge it to everybody. And if somebody refuses to pay it, I mean, the dealership has a decision to make. Do they want to let the customer walk over the dock fee, or do they want to sell the car? What they typically do is they will cut the price of the car but keep the dock fee. That's what you'll probably see if somebody does agree to eliminate the fee. Most dealers will not, because they cannot and still make a profit on the car. But they can get excessive. It doesn't hurt to ask, if somebody, no matter what they're trying to charge you. If I walk up to a new vehicle on a car dealer's lot and I look and I see a sticker beside the sticker, I'm going to read that little extra sticker and see what it says. I mean, if it's for legitimate accessories, it could be like, WeatherTech floor mats or something like that. If it's paint protection and, some type of fabric protector, there's a lot of markup in that. I'm going to ask them to knock that off. If it says something like market value adjustment, I might just leave, because, what they're going to do is use that as additional markup, and that allows them to show you, not necessarily pay you, but show you that they're giving you more for your trade-in than the dealer down the road that you just left. Well, how do they do that? Well, if somebody has exactly the same car down the road and they're charging $30,000, the window sticker is $30,000, but this other dealer has the exact same car, but they're charging $32,000, that extra $2,000 in markup, then they can discount the car that much more, right? I mean, it looks better. Well, they're discounting the car an extra $2,000. Well, they're really not, Mr. Customer, because it's the same car. They just have that extra sticker. Well, they're discounting it. People just don't use their heads. Or maybe they are using their heads and they're just using that as a negotiating point. But if you have a trade-in on that deal and it's actually worth $10,000, then that dealer can show you $12,000 for your car and not lose a dime. It's just fluff. And that's something that you don't want to pay for, and you don't want to be deceived by fluff. But it's easy to be if you're not paying attention. Okay, I'll be back in just 1 minute. Okay, I am back. If you do live in this area, not too far from me, I'm giving away $1,500 on Saturday. All you have to do is come down to Gateway and register, and then you have to come back on Saturday at 4 o'clock, and we're going to draw from the people that are there. And I'm giving away $1,500. And if you don't believe me, ask the guy we gave $1,000 to the day before yesterday, because he believes it. He took home 10 $100 bills, and then the previous Saturday, a lady got $500. So we did $500, then $1,000, now $1,500. Why do you do that, Lenny? Well, because it's fun, and it makes people's Christmas, and it's exciting, and it fills the showroom with people, and most of which don't come in to buy a car. They just come in to see what they won or see if they can win something. But it generates traffic and activity, and sometimes people do say, well, that's a pretty car. What would that cost? What could you pay me for my trade? It starts conversations. And as I say on this radio program, this podcast, that's not always the best time to buy a car. If you've been thinking about it anyway, then that's okay. But just because somebody's giving away money isn't necessarily a reason to go in, well, let's just buy a car while we're here. It's not like buying groceries or, a new Yeti. It's a little bit more intensive than that. Should take a little bit more thought. Yeah, but this guy who won, $1,000 day before yesterday, he said he was just sitting at home and he remembered seeing something on Facebook about that, and also remembered that we were doing it at 4:00, and I think it was 3:15. So he rushed down here, filled out the registration form, dropped it in the box, and I reach in there and pull out his name. And he was elated. He said, "You have no idea how much I needed this for Christmas." And that put a smile on his face and on my face and on everybody else that was there. Even the people who didn't win. They all won something. I give away something to everybody. But it's fun. I enjoy doing that kind of stuff during the holidays. And we're doing it for our employees here in a few weeks. And we're going to have a really big Christmas party. And we always give away a bunch of prizes and recognize people. And that's what I enjoy about this season. And there's a lot of people that put off automotive purchases and people buying cars for tax reasons right at the end of the year. So there's just a lot of activity, and it's just a lot of fun. So if I can help you with any way in your car search, it doesn't have to be buying from me, but no matter where you live, you can send me a text message to 423-552-2020. And if you want the My Car Guru guidebook, what you could do is get that, print it out, staple it together, and cram it down in somebody's stocking. It's a good stocking stuffer. They'll say, "What's this?" I said, well, it's something that will save you thousands and thousands of dollars over your lifetime if you just read it and pay attention to it. That's a pretty good gift. So send me your email address, and I'll make that happen. I'll send you a PDF, and if you don't have an email address, then just call the dealership, 423-639-5151, and I will print one out and mail it to you, and then you'll have it. So it's valuable information, and it's already working. I get so many positive comments from people who have requested and received the My Car Guru guidebook. So just go ahead and do that, and you don't have any clue how much money that will save you if you just put it to work. Well, thanks for listening to this edition of My Car Guru, and I'll see you next time.